Looks like The Woman King 2 could actually happen, even if Viola Davis's character dies, mainly because that's what she wants. And honestly, with how flexible the movie is with history, a bloodier, more intense sequel totally works. So it kind of feels like a win-win situation. Let's break down everything we know so far. The Woman King made a huge splash when it hit theaters, and Thuso Mbedu, one of its stars, recently talked about something pretty unexpected. Apparently, if they ever make a sequel, Viola Davis doesn't want her character, General Naniska, sticking around for long. In fact, Davis would rather she just die early on, and the reason isn't really about the story. It's more about how intense the whole experience of filming was for her the first time around. To back up a bit, The Woman King is this epic action film based on real history. It centers on the Agojie, a badass group of all-female warriors from the Kingdom of Dahomey in West Africa. Davis plays Naniska, their fierce leader. She serves under King Gizo and is responsible for leading the Agojie in a fight to break Dahomey free from its dependence on the Oyo Empire. Alongside her are Lashana Lynch as Lieutenant Agojie, Sheila Atim as Lieutenant Amenza, and Thuso Mbedu as Nawi, a new recruit who's trying to prove herself. The movie itself was a critical hit. It pulled off an impressive 95% score on Rotten Tomatoes and made over $19 million in its opening weekend. People praised the acting, the massive scale of the story, and especially the action scenes. But not everyone was thrilled. Some critics pointed out that the movie didn't stick closely to historical facts. Still, the filmmakers and Davis stood by their choices, saying that while they may have adjusted a few things, their goal was to tell a powerful story and entertain audiences. Now, in a chat with The Hollywood Reporter, Mbedu brought up how Davis really felt about the idea of doing a sequel. The truth is, Davis found the training for the first film so brutal that she joked about her character dying within the first 5 minutes of the next movie. During their prep for The Woman King, the actors had to undergo months of intense physical training, weightlifting, sprinting, weapons work, the whole deal. And for Davis, who was 57 at the time, that was absolutely exhausting. Mbedu shared a moment from those training days, saying Davis would laugh and say, if there's a sequel, Naniska should be toothless and on her deathbed. She wasn't kidding either. Davis genuinely felt that she couldn't go through all that again. So while they haven't officially committed to a sequel, Davis has already made her position clear. She's fine returning, just not for long. That makes sense, considering what went into making the film. The whole cast had to look and move like actual 19th century warriors. They weren't just acting tough. They had to be tough, and that took months of conditioning. The action scenes, which earned tons of praise, didn't come easy. For someone like Davis, already a seasoned actor with decades in the industry, that kind of physical toll isn't something she's eager to repeat. But even though The Woman King wraps up on a solid note, with Dahomey gaining independence from the Oyo Empire, there's still room to build on its story. Historically speaking, Dahomey did go on to fight the French in 2 wars toward the end of the 19th century. They lost both, but the Agojie left a huge impression. The French even acknowledge how formidable these women were. So if there's a sequel, it has plenty of history to draw from. But considering how draining the role was for Davis, she's hinting that if she comes back at all, it'll be for a dramatic early exit. And to be fair, that could actually work well for the story, especially if it clears the way for new characters to step up. Of course, one thing that can't be ignored is how The Woman King played around with the truth of Dahomey's past. While the Agojie were real, and so was King Gizo, the historical record shows that Gizo was heavily involved in the slave trade. He made a fortune selling people, which obviously clashes with the more heroic version we saw in the film. So in order to make a more inspiring and empowering story, the filmmakers had to soften that part of the past. But they didn't exactly hide that fact. The creative team admitted that they took some liberties, inventing characters and tweaking history to highlight the more admirable aspects of the Agojie. Naniska, for instance, is fictional, but she became the emotional anchor of the story. And by focusing on her and her fight against injustice, the film found a way to honor the spirit of the Agojie, even if some of the details weren't fully accurate. There's also talk about what direction a sequel could go. One intriguing option is focusing more on King Gizo's darker side. John Boyega, who plays Gizo, has apparently floated the idea himself. He's interested in showing the part of Gizo's story where he turns back to the slave trade, betraying the vision Nanisca had for a more ethical and sustainable future, focused on palm oil instead of people. And let's not forget that the original movie already hinted at some trouble between Nanisca and Gizo. Toward the end, she defies his orders to rescue Nawi and Agojie, which could easily sow the seeds for a rift. Even though things seem resolved when he names her woman king, that tension could carry into the next film. Gizo might decide that Nanisca's influence threatens his power or his profits and make a move against her. That would be a powerful setup for a sequel, especially if it leads to a kind of civil war within Dahomey. Since Nanisca isn't a real historical figure, the story has flexibility. And with Davis bowing out early, per her own wishes, the stage could be set for someone new to rise. That someone could easily be Nawi. She was the heart of the first movie, and there's a twist near the end when we learn she's actually Nanisca's long-lost daughter. That revelation adds layers to both characters. And if Nanisca were to die early in a sequel, Nawi would be the natural choice to step up as the new leader of the Agojie. This would create all kinds of drama because Nawi wasn't born in the kingdom. That alone would make her an outsider in the eyes of the palace elite, especially the king's other wives, who already couldn't stand Nanisca. And if word got out that Nanisca hadn't kept her vow of chastity, a core principle of the Agojie, that could tear the whole order apart. But there's also potential for Nawi to prove herself by taking the fight to slavers again. Maybe this time, battling the French. She could carry on the Agojie legacy, showing that their spirit still lives on. And if the Portuguese or Oyo Empire return, it would push Nawi to defend her people again, just like her mother did. There's also the chance to explore her relationship with Malik, the half-Portuguese man she connected with in the first film. A sequel could dive into whether that connection grows into something more, but it wouldn't be easy. Nawi would be juggling a lot. Duty, loyalty to her people, possible war, and maybe even romance. And just to stir things up even more, there's the idea that Gizo could see Nawi as a potential queen. He hinted at it before, and if she rises in power, he might try to solidify his position by marrying her. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.